I had once believed that every detail of my life was wrapped in perfection, a flawless marriage to Richard that shone like a beacon to our friends, family, and even casual acquaintances. Our home was the very definition of domestic bliss. Charming estate nestled in a leafy suburb, where every guest's compliment further bolstered the image we so carefully cultivated. Yet behind the artfully arranged flower vases, the pristine silverware, and the easy laughter that filled our evenings, an insidious truth was slowly taking root. For nearly a decade, I had woven a tapestry of what seemed like an immaculate life. I remember the early days of our courtship vividly, those whispered conversations over candlelit dinners, our dreams shared in the quiet moments before sleep, and the mutual promise to protect and nurture the love that bloomed so unexpectedly. Richard's dark eyes and reassuring smile had filled me with hope, and together we built a future that, at least on the surface, radiated happiness. We hosted grand parties, celebrated milestones with the utmost style, and in every public moment, we were the ideal couple. But as time went on, life's natural wear began to subtly distort the picture. In the soft glow of dawn, as I sipped my coffee and reviewed the day's schedule, I noticed peculiar inconsistencies: a meeting scheduled at odd hours, a phone that never truly rested beside his ear, and a fragrance that wasn't mine lingering in his cologne. At first, I convinced myself that these were the little quirks of a busy professional, not the harbingers of betrayal. Yet deep inside, a quiet alarm began to toll. It wasn't until a chilly autumn evening, when the leaves had just begun to blush with the colors of change, that the first undeniable signs of deceit surfaced. Richard had returned from work unusually late, his smile forced as if he were hiding secrets behind it. As I tidied the living room, a habit that brought me solace, I found a receipt tucked behind a framed photograph on our mantel. It was for an extravagant dinner at a swanky restaurant I'd never heard him mention, the kind of place reserved for celebrations, not routine work nights. My mind raced through possibilities until the scent of an unfamiliar perfume caught my attention, a scent that seemed both alluring and menacing. That night, restless and unable to sleep, I lay awake replaying every conversation and every glance we had shared over the years. I had always believed that love was built on trust, yet now that trust was waging a quiet battle with suspicion. My heart pounded as I made the decision to search for the truth. In the days that followed, I began a painstaking, almost ritualistic investigation into the life we had built together. I started with Richard's phone, an innocuous device that now seemed like a vault of hidden secrets. Under the pretext of organizing our shared calendar, I persuaded him to leave his tablet unattended for just a moment. With trembling fingers, I navigated through folders and applications, my eyes widening, as I uncovered a labyrinth of covert conversations and images. There, amid the mundane texts about work and weekend plans, lay a series of intimate messages, each one a shard of evidence pointing directly to an affair. There were photos, too, photos that captured Richard in moments of undeniable intimacy with Felicia, a coworker whose name I'd only heard in passing until now. Her presence in those images was magnetic, her smile both inviting and dangerously enigmatic. I saved every screenshot, every whispered confession recorded in digital time. With each piece of evidence, my heart hardened and my resolve grew. I was no longer the innocent wife who had once trusted so completely. I was now a woman scorned, determined to reclaim the dignity that had been so callously trampled upon. For weeks, I transformed our quiet home into a fortress of secrecy and strategy. I meticulously compiled every scrap of evidence, carefully, organizing the screenshots, receipts, and audio recordings into a dossier that chronicled the gradual erosion of our marriage. Every detail was documented: the exact timestamps of the late-night messages, the locations of the clandestine meetings, and even the tone in Richard's voice during those covert phone calls. I became an archivist of betrayal, a silent judge presiding over a case in which my heart was both the plaintiff and the jury. I spent long nights poring over the evidence, the glow of my computer screen illuminating a face that was no longer my own. Each revelation brought with it a surge of both pain and empowerment. In the quiet hours before dawn, I began to sketch out my plan of retribution, a plan that would not only expose Richard's treachery, but also serve as an irrevocable declaration of my worth. I chose the setting for my final act of defiance carefully. Our annual dinner party was fast approaching, a glamorous affair that drew our closest friends, influential neighbors, and even business associates. It was an event where Richard's reputation shone as brightly as the crystal chandeliers that adorned our dining hall, where his polished charm won accolades and admiration. To shatter that image, I needed to stage a spectacle that would leave no doubt about his misdeeds. As the weeks turned into days, I orchestrated every detail with the precision of a master strategist. I reached out to a discreet graphic designer who could transform my dossier into a dramatic multimedia presentation. Late into the night, we worked side by side in my study, combing through the evidence and selecting the most damning proofs, the steamy conversations that hinted at illicit passion, the receipts that traced a trail of expensive rendezvous, and the photographs that captured Felicia's captivating allure. With each passing moment, my plan solidified, evolving into a narrative of betrayal that would soon be laid bare for all to see. The day of the dinner party arrived with an air of anticipation. Our home was transformed into a glittering palace of light and sound, with tables dressed in pristine linens, soft music in the background, and guests arriving in elegant attire. I moved through the preparations like a quiet conductor orchestrating a symphony, every detail aligned to serve my ultimate purpose. As the guests mingled and laughter filled the corridors, I kept one eye on the clock and another on Richard. He moved among our friends with the confident ease of a man who believed his reputation was untouchable, his smile never faltering, even as I watched him exchange subtle, secretive glances with Felicia, a guest who had been invited that night under the guise of a mutual friend. Every smile, every whispered conversation between them ignited a spark of vindication deep within me. My heart pounded with anticipation as I rehearsed the sequence of events in my mind. I could almost see the expressions of shock, the silence that would follow as the truth unfurled on the giant screen set up in our drawing room. Every moment leading up to the revelation was carefully choreographed, a performance where I was both the director and the lead actor reclaiming her narrative. Dinner progressed with an almost surreal elegance. Course after course was served, with impeccable timing, each dish more sumptuous than the last. The guests indulged in polite conversation, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. I sat at the head of the table, my outward composure belying the tumultuous emotions swirling beneath. Every bite of food, every sip of wine, carried with it the weight of the impending revelation. As the final course was cleared and the ambient lighting was adjusted to signal the beginning of the evening's special presentation, I took a deep breath and signaled to the household staff. The room darkened momentarily, and then the large screen flickered to life, a canvas on which the evidence of betrayal was about to be projected. I stepped forward, my voice steady and resonant, and began to narrate the story of our once perfect marriage. One by one, images and texts cascaded across the screen. The room, filled with the soft clinks of cutlery and murmured conversations, fell into a tense, expectant hush. Each photograph, each message, was a revelation, a tangible reminder of the deceit that had festered in the shadows of our lives. I could see Richard's face draining of color, his eyes widening with a dawning horror as the evidence of his duplicity was laid bare for everyone to witness. For me, that moment on the screen was a culmination of months of silent suffering and calculated planning. I recounted in measured tones the series of betrayals that had unraveled our marriage, I detailed the secret phone calls that had stretched into the early hours of the morning, the mysterious outings that had defied explanation, and the undeniable allure of Felicia that had ensnared him. With every word, I reclaimed a piece of myself that had been corroded by doubt and pain. The atmosphere in the room was electric with shock and disbelief. Friends exchanged disbelieving glances, some murmuring in hushed tones, others sitting in stunned silence. Richard's carefully maintained façade was crumbling before the eyes of those who had once lauded him as the epitome of charm and reliability. In that heart-wrenching moment, the scales of justice and retribution tilted irrevocably in my favor. Yet, as the presentation continued, I realized that the real battle had only just begun. The unveiling was not merely an act of revenge, it was a declaration of my right to be seen, heard, and respected. I had transformed my personal anguish into a weapon of truth, a means to force the world to acknowledge the cost of betrayal. Even as the evidence streamed across the screen, a profound mixture of emotions surged within me. The pain of the betrayal still stung with every heartbeat, yet I felt an unexpected empowerment in knowing that the truth, however bitter, had finally been set free. In the quiet aftermath, as the guests slowly began to murmur and the weight of the revelation sank in, I could sense a shifting dynamic in the room. Conversations halted, the clinking of glasses faded. All eyes, even those of the most indifferent onlookers, were fixed on Richard. He attempted to muster an explanation, a feeble defense against the overwhelming tide of proof. But his words came out as mere whispers, drowned by the echo of my carefully constructed narrative. I watched as his once confident posture crumpled, the man who had once commanded admiration now reduced to a figure of despair and regret. I left the stage with my head held high, a woman who had, through sheer determination and unyielding resolve, reclaimed the dignity that had been under siege. The seeds of his undoing had been sown, and as the guests began to retreat into uneasy clusters of conversation, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. In the hours that followed the dramatic presentation, our home became a labyrinth of whispered conversations and stifled gasps. Some guests offered quiet words of sympathy. Others, with less restraint, let their disapproval spill forth in sharp, disapproving tones. Amid the chaos, I retreated to the solitude of my study, a sanctuary where I could gather my thoughts and begin to contemplate the long, uncertain road ahead. There, in the dim light of a solitary desk lamp, I reviewed every piece of evidence once more. The digital dossier lay open on my screen, a silent testament to the betrayal that had altered the very foundation of my life. I ran my fingers over the pages of printed receipts and handwritten notes, each one a reminder of a promise, broken and a trust betrayed. But as painful as those memories were, they also served as a powerful catalyst for the transformation I was determined to achieve. In that quiet solitude, I began to draft a new narrative, a narrative where I was no longer a victim of circumstances, but the architect of my own redemption. The long night gave way to the pale light of early dawn, and with it came a steely resolve to rebuild not only the shattered remnants of my marriage, but also the fractured pieces of my own identity. As part one of this tumultuous saga draws to a close, I stand at the precipice of a new beginning. The revelation at the dinner party has irrevocably altered the dynamics of my life, and though the pain of betrayal is still fresh, it has ignited within me a burning desire to forge a future, defined by strength, independence, and authenticity. Richard's indiscretions have not only stripped away the illusion of perfection, but have also laid bare the truth that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can pave the way for the most transformative rebirths. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful evening, I have come to realize that every scar tells a story of survival, of defiance, and ultimately of a woman who refused to be diminished by the treachery of another. The path ahead is uncertain, fraught with the challenges of healing and rediscovery, yet I am determined to embrace it with an open heart and an unyielding spirit. And so, with the embers of heartbreak slowly cooling into a steady, resolute flame, I step forward into the unknown. The evidence is laid bare, the secrets unveiled, and the chapter of betrayal has been written in stark detail for all to see. Now, the question remains, what will come next? In the next part of this journey, the consequences of that fateful night will ripple outward, reshaping relationships, igniting old wounds, and setting the stage for a reckoning that will challenge the very essence of who I am, and who Richard, once so confident in his deceit, will ultimately become. In the wake of that fateful dinner party, our lives began to unravel in ways neither Richard nor I could have foreseen. The sting of betrayal had rippled outward into every corner of our existence, shaking the very foundation of our shared history. As the early light of morning crept through the drawn curtains, I found myself immersed in a disorienting mix of relief, sorrow, and an unyielding determination. The dramatic revelation had shattered the illusion of our perfect life, leaving behind only raw, unvarnished truth. And in that truth, I sensed the first spark of my own rebirth. The guests had departed in a flurry of whispered condolences and furtive glances, leaving our home eerily silent. In the lonely hours of that morning, the weight of everything pressed down on me. I stood alone in the foyer, the echoes of the night's revelation still reverberating in my ears. The evidence I had so meticulously gathered had not only exposed Richard's duplicity, but had also ignited a catharsis within me, a need to redefine who I was and to reclaim every shattered fragment of my identity. Richard's world, once built on the pillars of charm and deception, began its slow collapse. The shock of the evening's events sent ripples through his professional and personal networks. Colleagues who had once admired his business acumen now looked upon him with pity or disdain. His reputation, once untouchable, was tarnished by the undeniable evidence of his infidelity. As whispers filled the corridors of his workplace and murmurs circulated in elite social circles, Richard's carefully crafted façade crumbled in public and private alike. At home, he retreated into a fortress of denial and anger. I witnessed him pacing the length of our study, his eyes burning with a mixture of regret and rage, as if each step he took was an attempt to outrun the consequences of his actions. His nights became tormented, filled with restless pacing and anguished outbursts that betrayed his inner turmoil. In these moments, the man I once believed was invincible was reduced to a shadow of his former self, a desperate soul confronting the ruin he had wrought. While Richard grappled with his shattered persona, I embarked on a parallel journey, one of self-discovery and healing. I enrolled in a series of workshops on empowerment and resilience, determined to rebuild not just my identity, but also the strength to navigate a future unburdened by betrayal. In quiet moments at a local library or over coffee in a sunlit cafe, I began piecing together a new narrative for myself. The painful past slowly gave way to a vision of a life defined by autonomy and genuine connection. I formed unexpected alliances with women who had weathered similar storms. In these intimate gatherings, over shared meals and heartfelt conversations, we exchanged stories of heartache and triumph. Their experiences, though different in detail, echoed my own inner battles and aspirations. Each narrative became a stepping stone, reinforcing my belief that adversity could be transformed into a source of empowerment. I started writing again, a habit I had abandoned in the wake of our tumultuous years together. Words flowed from my pen as I documented not only the pain of betrayal, but also the gradual resurgence of hope, the slow rekindling of a passion for life that had lain dormant. As the scandal rippled outward, our mutual acquaintances found themselves caught in the crossfire of judgment and speculation. Invitations to gatherings were suddenly met with raised eyebrows and whispered comments. Friends who had once embraced our union began to distance themselves, uncertain whether to offer support or to silently condemn the unraveling of what had been portrayed as a flawless marriage. The social fallout was as brutal as it was swift. I realized that our private tragedy had become a public spectacle, one that demanded I face not only my own emotions, but also the prying eyes of a community that once revered us. At work, I encountered a mixture of pity and admiration. Colleagues aware of the scandal began to approach me with offers of assistance and kind words. Yet, there was also an undercurrent of judgment, an unspoken belief that the perfect image I had once maintained was irrevocably tarnished by my personal strife. In these moments, I discovered a deep-seated truth. The opinions of others, however critical, could no longer define my worth. Each dismissive comment, every sidelong glance, served as a reminder that my journey was mine alone, to shape. I resolved that I would not be shackled by the expectations of a society that valued appearances over authenticity. In the months following the explosive revelation, I channeled my grief into action. I took up a volunteer position at a local shelter, offering my time and empathy to others grappling with their own betrayals and losses. It was there, in the midst of everyday struggles, that I discovered the profound impact of genuine compassion. The shelter became a haven, a place where the broken were welcomed, heard, and gradually mended. The women I met there, each carrying scars of their own, reaffirmed my belief that vulnerability was not a weakness, but rather a bridge to healing and empowerment. At the same time, I began to revisit passions that had long been set aside. I enrolled in art classes, where the blank canvas offered an opportunity to express the tumult of my emotions through vibrant strokes of color. Each session was a small act of defiance against the narrative of despair that had threatened to define. Slowly, the palette of my life began to fill with hues of resilience and hope. I discovered that while betrayal had left deep wounds, it had also unearthed reservoirs of strength I never knew existed. One brisk autumn afternoon, I found myself standing before a mirror, a silent, unyielding witness to the transformations I was undergoing. In that reflective moment, I saw not the broken remnants of a shattered marriage, but a woman emerging anew. The lines of sorrow had softened, replaced by an expression of determination and quiet pride. I had learned to see beauty in the scars, for they were the marks of battles fought and won. It was a turning point, an intimate reckoning that forced me to accept that my identity was far more complex and resilient than the limited portrait Richard had once dictated. I began to share my story more openly, both in writing and in conversation. I discovered that vulnerability, when met with empathy, could be a source of incredible strength. I became a voice for those who had suffered in silence, advocating for a truth that was not defined by perfection, but by the courage to be real. The narrative of our once idyllic marriage, now marred by deceit, transformed into a powerful testament to the possibility of rebirth through adversity. Meanwhile, Richard's world continued its downward spiral. His once commanding presence had given way to desperate attempts at reconciliation, a series of frantic phone calls, tearful pleas, and broken promises to mend what he had so carelessly destroyed. Yet, each gesture was met with the implacable barrier of my newfound resolve. I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The trust we had shared was forever severed. I arranged one final meeting, a confrontation meant not to salvage what was lost, but to close the final chapter of our shared history. We met in a quiet, dimly lit cafe, far removed from the memories of our past life. The atmosphere was heavy, with the unspoken truth, punctuated only by the low murmur of other patrons. Richard arrived with an air of contrition, his eyes betraying both regret and fear. I sat across from him, calm and unwavering, the evidence of his betrayals still burning like embers in my memory. He tried to offer apologies, to explain his failings as the result of a momentary lapse, a defense that crumbled under the weight of all I had endured. In that final confrontation, Every word he spoke was stripped of pretense, leaving behind only the raw, unvarnished truth. I listened, not out of a desire to heal, but to affirm that the past was immutable. As he begged for forgiveness, I realized that the final act of retribution was not the public humiliation at the dinner party, but rather the quiet severing of ties that had long bound me to a painful legacy. I told him, in a voice that was both gentle and unyielding, that there was no coming back from the choices he had made. Our paths were irrevocably diverged. With Richard's final words echoing in the quiet cafe, I stepped back into a future that I was determined to define on my own terms. The days that followed were a medley of bittersweet nostalgia and exhilarating new beginnings. I began to travel, embracing the liberating notion that the world was vast and filled with possibilities. Each journey was a lesson in resilience, a way to piece together a mosaic of experiences that would eventually comprise the new portrait of my life. I wandered through bustling city streets and quiet rural landscapes, each destination offering a unique flavor of life. In foreign lands, I found solace in unexpected friendships, shared over meals in vibrant markets and long conversations under starry skies. These encounters, though fleeting, were imbued with a profound sense of connection, a reminder that trust, once betrayed, could be rebuilt in the fertile ground of new beginnings. In my travels, I encountered others who had also endured the tumult of betrayal. We exchanged stories like precious heirlooms, each narrative resonating with the universal theme of loss and the transformative power of forgiveness, both of others and of oneself. These conversations were cathartic, a collective affirmation that the pain of the past need not dictate the shape of the future. Rather, it was the courage to rise again that defined us. Back home, the transformation in my inner world began to reflect in every aspect of my daily life. I reimagined my surroundings, redecorating the space that had once been a battleground of memories, now turning it into a sanctuary of hope and creative expression. I filled the rooms with light and color, replacing dark memories with art and objects that symbolized renewal. Every item in the house told a story of a fresh start, a declaration that my home, like my heart, was open to new experiences and relationships. I started speaking at community events, sharing my journey with groups of women who had faced similar betrayals. In each heartfelt conversation, I reiterated a simple yet powerful message: that reclaiming one's identity was the ultimate act of self-love. I stressed that every scar, every tear shed in the darkness, was a testament to survival, a sign of a life lived boldly despite the odds. My story became a beacon for those who had lost faith, a reminder that while betrayal could leave deep wounds, it could also pave the way for transformation and liberation. One crisp winter evening, as I sat by the fireplace in my newly renovated study, I allowed myself a rare moment of quiet triumph. The flames danced in the hearth, echoing the passionate resilience that now coursed through my veins. I revisited the dossier of evidence that had once served as a weapon against Richard, now transformed into a chronicle of a painful past that had ultimately led to my liberation. I reflected on the painful irony. The very act that had once destroyed our marriage had also ignited a rebirth, a chance for me to rebuild not only my life, but my very soul. The years of deception and heartache had distilled into a singular truth: that the greatest revenge was not the public spectacle of humiliation, but the unwavering pursuit of one's own happiness and fulfillment. In the quiet solitude of that winter night, I understood that my journey was not defined by the betrayal I had suffered, but by the strength and courage with which I had embraced every twist and turn along the way. In the months and years that followed, the world continued to turn, indifferent to the personal dramas that unfolded in its midst. Yet, in the quiet corners of my heart, the lessons of those tumultuous days remained indelible. Richard's absence, once a source of lingering pain, became a symbol of the liberation I had fought so hard to achieve. Our shared past, with all its shattered illusions and broken promises, slowly receded into the background. A chapter closed, never to be reopened. I built a new life, a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, courage, and hope. The scars of betrayal, though forever etched in memory, became badges of honor, testifying to the battles fought and the victories won. I embraced every new sunrise with gratitude and every challenge with a fierce determination to live authentically. My home transformed into a space not defined by the ghosts of the past, but by the vibrant energy of a life reimagined. In time, I found love again, not the kind built on a fragile facade of perfection, but a love that was raw, honest, and deeply human. It blossomed slowly, nurtured by mutual respect and an unspoken understanding of each other's vulnerabilities. This new love, free from the trappings of deceit and pretense, reminded me that while the pain of betrayal could never be entirely erased, it could be transcended by the beauty of genuine connection. Now, as I stand on the threshold of a future defined by my own terms, I see the journey I have traversed, a road marked by the harsh lessons of betrayal, the bitter taste of revenge, and ultimately, the triumph of self-redemption. Every step, every tear, and every victory has contributed to the mosaic of who I am today. A woman who has learned that the only true power lies in embracing the entirety of one's experiences, no matter how painful. Looking back, I realized that the party, the dramatic unveiling of Richard's transgressions, was not merely an act of vengeance but a catalyst for transformation. It forced a reckoning that stripped away the superficial layers of our lives, exposing raw truths that needed to be confronted. In that moment of public humiliation, I discovered my own resilience. In the silence that followed, I found the strength to forge a new destiny. The scars remain, a permanent reminder of the betrayal that once threatened to break me. But they are also symbols of survival, a testament to the unwavering spirit that emerged from the ashes of deceit. I am no longer defined by what was lost, but by the beauty of what I have gained. A renewed sense of self, a community of kindred, souls, and the unshakable belief that even the darkest betrayals can give birth to a light that shines brighter than ever before. And so, as the seasons change and life unfolds with all its unpredictable twists, I continue my journey with an open heart and a spirit unburdened by regret. The pages of my life are filled with new stories of hope, resilience, and the unyielding power of self-love. My past will always be a part of me, but it no longer defines me. Instead, it serves as the foundation upon which I build a future that is truly my own. This is my final reckoning, a declaration that I am free, whole, and ready to embrace whatever comes next. I uncovered my husband's cheating, and I made him pay not with a public spectacle alone, but by reclaiming every piece of my shattered self and forging a life that no deceit could ever tarnish. The journey was painful, the cost was high, but in the end, I emerged reborn, a testament to the enduring strength of a woman who refused to be defined by betrayal. When the final curtain falls on this chapter of my life, I know that the real victory lies in the courage to start over and the determination to transform pain into a beacon of hope for others. This is not just a story of revenge. It is the story of rebirth, resilience, and the unyielding power of a heart that has learned to love itself again. Thank you for following this journey with me.